Welcome to topic 2.2, the Mongols. We're going to do the 5 W's and we're going to do causes and effects. Let's start with the who. We're talking about the Mongols. We're talking about pastoral peoples, as your book stated, right? What the heck does that mean? What's pastoral people mean? Like goat herders, sheep herders. They had these little villages and they're kind of separated, isolated from each other. There's a guy named Temujin, and Temujin is going to unite these Mongols, these pastoral peoples. And he's going to turn them into the largest connected land-based empire in human history. There's an old Chinese proverb. It says, "Show me the boy at 8 and I'll show you the man." And I thought about that when prepping this. It's the story of Temujin when he's 14 years old. He's getting bullied by his older brother, right? That's what older brothers are for, right? So it's kind of a rite of passage. What does Temujin do when he's bullied? Right? Maybe you got an older brother. What did you do when your older brother bullied you when you were younger? Well, Temujin murdered him. He killed his older brother. So if there's any truth to the Chinese proverb, you could kind of see the writing on the wall. And there were some things in our book that weren't there that I just wanted to point out. Because, the big things are cultural exchanges, right? The College Board has a big emphasis on that. And then and I think it was our book stated something like they didn't leave a huge cultural footprint. And I kind of disagree. And I'll just be throwing in my 2 cents on that and giving you some examples. I think the Mongols did leave a big cultural footprint. But as far as some of the, behind the scenes stuff going on, Temujin, when he's about to be married, I think she was still his fiance, not quite his wife yet, if I remember correctly. Someone kidnaps her. So Temujin puts a crew together. He goes and gets his fiance, and he kills him. He kills the people that kidnapped her. Well, when he gets her back, really shortly thereafter, she's pregnant with her first son. So the word around the campfire always was, hey, that's not really his kid. That's the bastard son of his wife's rapist. And that was always kind of in the background. When it comes into play, a lot of historians would argue, in the decline of the Mongol Empire, it's going to cause a lot of unrest and unease amongst his progeny, his kids, his grandkids, great-grandkids. And, not to play armchair psychiatrist or anything, but, man, you got to wonder if this had any effect on what Temujin, once he becomes Genghis Khan, and what he would do in his expansion of the Mongol Empire. He would end up in his life raping so many women that to this day, 1 out of every 200 people in the world are a descendant of Genghis Khan. That's a crazy stat. Women would commit suicide before their village was attacked by the Mongols. They chose to take their own life to being raped to death by the Mongols. And then when Genghis Khan is on his deathbed, he names his oldest son the successor. Well, the second oldest son, he decides he's going to play the bastard card. And he says, well, Pops, it's not really your kid. Maybe it'd be better if I was in charge. And Genghis Khan doesn't like that. And Genghis Khan says, you know what? I'm going to give it to my third son. Well, there's a problem with that. And the other 2 brothers agree. The third son is a raging alcoholic. And this brings me to a cultural exchange that isn't talked about in your book, but I think it's important historically because of the effect that it has on the family of Genghis Khan and their eventual decline. The Mongolians never really had access the good alcohol, the good booze. They drank, it was like mare's milk, like freaking horse milk. And it was a low ABV. And it just sounds horrible. So it sounds like it didn't taste very good. And they still drink it today. I didn't learn this in a book, but I think I learned this in Honest John's in the Cass Quarter back in the day. And somebody was telling me, I think it's like in Kazakhstan, all the stands over there, they call it kumis, and then they drink it. It's like low ABV. It's like fermented mare's milk. Well, when the Mongol Empire starts expanding, they get access to real booze, and they got the money and the power to get all they want. We've seen this happen other times in history. Once, alcohol is introduced to a culture, it can be devastating. So I think that's a huge cultural exchange, is the booze. Because that third son, the first and second sons are saying, look, Pops, you can't give control of the largest empire in the world, to this sock, this alky dumpster fire of a human being. He's incredibly irresponsible. But Genghis Khan does, right? And you think maybe he'll step up to the plate. No, he doesn't, because he ends up drinking himself to death. I think it was like within 6 months. So here you are, arguably the most powerful man in the world, and you just proceed, right, to drink yourself to death. So it's a big what if in history. Could the Mongol Empire have gone longer? Maybe not all this dissension. What if his third son was not like this, this debilitated dipso? Because his wife is going to take over. So that didn't go over well with the other brothers either. So you're just going to have all kinds of family drama, from this point forward. So a lot of historians point to that family drama that caused a lot of problems with the Mongol Empire. Okay, let's move to number 2, the what. We're talking about the Mongol Empire. We're talking about the largest connected land-based empire in world history. Now, there's a couple of things that cause confusion I want to clear up. And I think somebody brought this up Friday in the live lecture. Yes, they were bigger than the Roman Empire. The Roman Empire, I think, gets emphasized more in Western culture, in Western history books, and your traditional secondary and undergraduate education. But yes, Mongol Empire was bigger than the Roman Empire. And then the other one is, hey man, what about the British Empire? The British Empire, yeah, you got me on that one. They were bigger in square miles than the Mongol Empire. However, they weren't connected. The Mongol Empire is the largest connected empire in world history. And it was like roughly 9.3 million square miles. And to give you a frame of reference on that, the United States is roughly 3.8 million square miles. Okay, let's talk about the where. Okay, so Genghis Khan, Temujin, it's originated like north of the Gobi Desert. It's like if you got on your Google machine and went to Google Maps, it's like look around like the border between Mongolia and Siberia in East Asia, and they would end up conquering. Genghis Khan, his sons, his grandsons, they would end up conquering most of modern day Russia, China, Korea, Southeast Asia, Persia, modern day Iran, India, the Middle East, and Eastern Europe. Let's talk about the when. Temujin's born in 1162. He's elected Khan in 1206. And the Mongol Empire would exist roughly from 1206 to 1368. The Mongol influence, even after the empire falls, they still have a lot of influence in places like Russia, etc. And sometimes they just assimilate into the culture. But on his name real quick, there's a lot of confusion on it. Is it Chinggis Khan? Is it Genghis Khan? Well, I think our textbook, and I think most of the documentaries I asked you to watch, you hear Genghis Khan. Well, there's been a big push, and I agree with it, from the East, telling all us Westerners, hey man, you guys pronounce his name wrong. You spell it wrong and you pronounce it wrong. His name's Chinggis Khan, not Genghis Khan. Why don't you say it right? So there is a movement for it. But if one teacher or one book says Chinggis Khan and the other one says Genghis Khan, it's the same guy. Don't let it confuse you. And, I don't know if it's that big of a deal. But, we've been saying Genghis Khan here for so long. I don't know if it's going to change anytime soon. But what did the name mean? What did it translate to? Chinggis Khan translates to ruler of all. That's what the name was. So when he goes from Temujin, he becomes Chinggis Khan, ruler of all. Okay, let's go to the why. He wanted to build the Mongols into the biggest empire in the world. The power, the money. Now let's go over the causes and effects. So, check out your learning objectives in the C.E.D. We're going to address those. And, there's tons of causes and effects. And I am trying to throw my 2 cents here on this one. I do think they left a larger cultural footprint than the book suggested. But I got 24. I'm going to give you 20 causes and effects here. The big 3: establishing, flourishing trade along the Silk Road. It's big money. People were safe. These merchants, these traders. Man, we got the Mongols backing you up, right? This is mafioso stuff. I got protection, man. I'm protected. No one's going to mess with me. I can trade. I can make money here. So they encouraged more prosperity, a better economy, with the security that they offered on the Silk Road. Now, like we said, I think it was in the last podcast, the 2 bigger contributions really weren't what they intended. The spread of religion. Okay, number 2, the spread of religion was even bigger. So you take Buddhism, for example. A lot of merchants converted to Buddhism, not so much for spiritual reasons. Well, 1, Buddhism originally was atheistic. But 2, a lot of them converted to Buddhism just for business reasons, so they could connect to their potential customers. So they would convert to Buddhism. Say, I'm Buddhist too. Okay, do business with me. And they're like, hey, what's Buddhism? I don't know, bro, but I'm just trying to, make some money out here. So they would convert to Buddhism. But the other thing is, I think it's important to know that Buddhism was originally atheistic. It's on the Silk Road. These merchants, there were some parts of Buddhism that they kind of didn't like. And one of them was how Buddhism taught that material possessions are like an illusion. So these merchants, man, these guys are hustlers, right? They're making moves. Man, they're all about the money. They're all about the dollars, man. So we can't have that in there. And they kind of turned Buddha into a deity themselves. And when they started Mahayana Buddhism. You read about that in Unit 1. And it kind of becomes a religion. But the one thing that's so appealing to people, why they liked Buddhism, then and now, that it's more of a philosophy. I read a book over the summer by Robert Wright, Why Buddhism is True. It's not religious. It's like a scientific and psychological evaluation of why Buddhism works. So what does it mean by works? The intent of the Buddha, he came from a wealthy family, that he wanted to find happiness and inner peace, and he wanted other people to know how to gain that, right? Not that money's bad or anything. It's good to have goals. You want to have money. Having money is a lot better than not having money, that's for sure. But it's not everything. Nothing's everything. If you think every problem in your life's going to go away the second you have enough money, you're gonna be in for a disappointing life, and you kind of waste your years. Because natural selection is why we are still here as a species. Natural selection hardwires you to always want more and fight and pass your genes down. Well, that's good because we still exist as a human race. But the argument in Robert Wright's book talks about, guess what? Natural selection doesn't care if you're happy. So the Buddha went out to find a way where how can you enjoy every day? It's good to have goals. It's good to, but, if you spend your whole life just okay, when I get out of my parents' house, then I'll be happy. Then you get out of your parents' house. Okay, when I graduate college, then I'll be happy. Right now, I got to focus on this. Okay, when I graduate college, you graduate college. Okay, now when I get married and have a house, have my own kids, then I'll be happy. Then you do that. Well, when the kids get out of college, and when I have some time and money for myself, then I'll be happy. So you get there, well, now I'm too old to enjoy anything. I'm sick, whatever. You look back and you spent your whole life waiting to be happy. You spent your whole life just chasing a carrot. And you never just sat and said, man, today's a beautiful day. Life is good. And that's kind of what the Buddha brought to the table. That was the message that was so appealing to people. But it gets changed to a religion by the merchants and the traders and the people on the Silk Road. Okay. Number 3, big one. Disease, right? Bubonic plague, the Black Death. It's going to wipe out, I don't know, I have the number in front of me. It was somewhere like 42% or something of Europe. And it's the fleas on the black rats. And the fleas transfer the disease to people. And it's horrible. Now, this is one of my arguments where I disagree with the book about the long-lasting cultural footprint of the Mongols. I have read, scholarship and, peer-reviewed journals and that make a connection between, something that was horrible for Europe at the time, the Black Plague. But in those centuries, they're building up immunities of these horrible diseases. When the Europeans come west, right, when you're Christopher Columbuses, your Hernan Cortez in 1519, your Pizarros, guys like Cortez, they got rolled by the Mexica, the Aztecs, the Mexicans, right? They got rolled on the battlefield. If you read Hugh Thomas's book, Conquest, he writes about Hernan Cortez is under a tree crying in defeat. It's over. He's done. He only had like 550 dudes with him. You're not going to take over all of Mexico with 550 guys. But he does. How? Unintentional germ warfare, right? They start dropping like flies, dying of smallpox. So you could make the argument, and some historians do, that, the Mongols, the Silk Roads, the bubonic plague, that cultural footprint is still present. It affects world history, in the 15th and 16th centuries with European conquest of the Western Hemisphere. So I think that's a huge cultural footprint. Okay, number 4, the causes and effects. Well, the first 3 are the big 3. Number 4, they formed alliances with other tribes. Genghis Khan was really good at this. Number 5, the ruthless rampage of rape, murder, theft, and rape. Women would commit suicide, as I said, rather than be captured and raped by the Mongols. And number 6, after they conquered, they absorbed the resources, their engineers, the technology. This was smart. They said, what do you have to offer that could help us be a bigger empire and be more efficient? And they would steal their ideas, and they'd steal their technology. Number 7, and this was really strange at the time, they allowed their conquered territories to keep their religion. Like in Persia, they would conquer, and not only did they let them keep their religion, this was even more unheard of. The conquerors, the Mongols, they converted to Islam. And they let them keep their land. And you could kind of function as before as long as you pledged loyalty to the Mongols. So this is the mafia shakedown, right? Pledge your loyalty, we'll let you be. And, in a weird way, like, if you get past the rape and the murder, you kind of got a decent deal with the Mongols. And it was smart on their end because I don't have to micromanage this territory. I don't have to worry as much about rebellions, about, assassination attempts. I don't have to worry as much about that because these people are kind of happy. Like, I'm kind of giving them a decent deal, right? So I thought that was a smart move by them. So number 8, discipline culture. They're They're tough people. They're hardworking. They know how to ride a horse. They know how to use weapons. They know how to fight. And they had some hardcore rules too. You know, if you ever saw 300 or studied Sparta, if one person deserted in the Mongols, let's say you desert your unit, they'd kill the entire unit. You know, how's that for a rule, right? For morale. Number 9, advanced education with paper and alphabet. So you're spreading education. Some of the places that they conquered, their literacy rates and their level of education actually went up. They would sometimes improve the areas they conquered. So they had like a different. They did like a conquering 2.0 in a way, and it worked. And then I think my argument is that's great because now you don't have to replace everybody. You don't have to reinvent the wheel. You let them keep rolling, and they're not getting that bad of a deal, so they're less likely to rebel. I think that had a lot to do with their empire being as big as it was and lasting as long as it did. Advanced military strategies. They're able to conquer China, even though they're outnumbered 101. They made armor that the Europeans were using. I'm thinking like King Arthur, Knights of the Round Table, all that stuff I see in the movies. Well, guess what? The way they fought like this quick, fast attack, surprise. And anybody that studies history, when you study the Mongols, you got to think of like, man, you think of like the Nazis. That's how the Nazis did it with the Blitzkrieg, the Lightning War. You can see how the Nazis patterned themselves after the Mongols. That'd be another argument I would make on their long-lasting cultural footprint. So armor became obsolete because they were just too slow in battle. They couldn't hang with the Mongols. Mongols rolled them. And these walls they had for defensive purposes, Mongols made those obsolete. Went through them, around them, over them. And number 11, I got an efficient command structure. That's kind of self-explanatory. Number 12, a messenger force. If you think about like the Pony Express you learned in 9th grade, well, before there was a Pony Express, the Mongols were doing that. And they had stories where their guys were so disciplined, they were taking a message on a horse. The guy would sleep while riding the horse, so he didn't lose time. Now, fast communication might not sound like a big deal in the age of smarty phones and, FaceTube and text messaging. But, at this time, if you could communicate to your unit before your enemy could, that could be the difference between winning and losing a battle. And they kind of created like this international post office, which is another argument I would make on their long-lasting cultural footprint. Okay, 13, special forces, right? How do you kill a snake? You chop off the head. These special forces would go in and just take out somebody at the top, take out a leader, and then everybody else would fall in place. Number 14, the use of POWs for labor and fodder. Work them, right? They'd work them, and then the next invasion, use these guys to take the brunt of the initial attack. Let them die, and then while they're getting filled with arrows, your guys can overtake the enemy. 15, using banknotes and paper currency before Europe did. Another one I would argue, the Mongols did leave a long-lasting footprint because they kind of invented the ATM, the flying cash. That was an ATM. So that was huge. 16, this one didn't go as well. They attempted to implement the Uyghur alphabet. UYGHUR. It didn't expand the entire empire. It didn't really take like they were hoping it would. But today it's still used in Mongolia. 17, the Mongolian conquest of Persia. You talk about a cause and effect here. You talk about continuity and change. Here's a change. Christian crusaders and Mamluk Muslims have been slaughtering each other for years. Well, the Mongols were so big and so feared that Christian crusaders and Mamluk Muslims, sworn enemies, they united and teamed up together to fight the Mongols, right? That's when you're doing pretty good. You can get those two to get along. Those two unite against you. Okay, 18. The rule of Russia, the Mongol rule of Russia, it kind of cuts them off from Europe. And this is another argument I would make, that the cultural footprint was big and it did last. Because Russian history is kind of altered forever, and it's something that they struggle with. I love Russian history. I think it's fascinating. But there's constantly this struggle to catch up to Europe. And we'll talk more about that when we talk about Peter the Great. But even if you fast forward to Nicholas II, Lenin, and Stalin, in the 20th century, there's still this need for Russia to catch up to the West, catch up to Europe. And a lot of people say because the Mongol invasion of Russia changed their culture forever, and that they actually formed like the modern day Russian state, that cultural influence. 19, we talked about it, the immunity that Europeans would have, the cultural exchanges, right? The Columbian exchange. Many historians will do that. They'll connect the Columbian exchange to the Silk Roads and the Mongols, far away and along many years before. And I agree with that. And number 20, Kublai Khan, the Great Khan, when he defeats the Chinese, it's Genghis Khan's grandson, I believe. And when he took over China, he actually made them more prosperous. He improved their trade, and we know the business aspect with other countries went even better. Okay, man, so that's the 5 W's. That's your causes and effects. Remember, these podcasts are just supplemental, man. I'm just touching on big topics, trying to add some outside stuff now and then. Make sure you read your textbook. Make sure you watch the videos. And I'll see you guys next time.